Karakorum, former capital of the Mongolian Empire, the birthplace of perhaps mankind's greatest ever act of revenge and the beginnings of planet Earth's biggest center of population control via mass population beheadings, because the history of Karakorum is the history of the Mongol Empire, the people who brought you horseback archery and the total annihilation of entire civilizations. These were not people you wanted to screw around with. I am AncientSwan. This is a video in a series of world's best videos about lost cities as voted for by me and my mum, and today we are all about Karakorum and the history of a city that played a key role in kicking ass and taking names, circa 13th century AD. So, let's start with the man of the hour, Genghis Khan. Now, Genghis wasn't just a warlord, he was the Steve Jobs of conquest. But where Jobs brought apples, Genghis brings battle. But before we get to Karakorum, there is a wee bit of prehistory to explain. You see, at this point in time and this part of Earth, there existed two empires, the Mongol Empire, which was comparatively new to the area, and the great Khwarezmian Empire, which had ruled here for more than 1,000 years. In 1218 AD, Genghis Khan decided to attempt to establish trade relations with the Khwarezmians. As you do, he sent emissaries to Khwarezm to emphasize his hope for a trade road. The ruler of the empire, however, responded by openly accusing the party of spying before then seizing their gifts and arresting the party. This did not go down too well with Genghis, but still, no blood had been spilt yet, so no need to worry. So Genghis tries again. This time, he sends an envoy of 3 men to the ruler of Khwarezm again in order to establish trade. The ruler responds by executing not only the 3 men of the envoy, but also by killing the entire merchant party and seizing all their fancy gifts. And it was at this stage that Genghis Khan went into a little bit of a huff. And when I say huff, what I mean is that Genghis murdered everyone he saw who even smelt like they had been vaguely near or heard of the Khwarezmian Empire at some point in their life. And you would, wouldn't you? If you've tried to be nice twice. And both times, not only have your precious gifts been seized, but on the second attempt, your entire party is butchered and chopped into wee pieces. At the very least, you'd be striking these dickheads off your Christmas card list. That's it! No more Merry Christmases for you! Well, Genghis didn't just reply in the passive-aggressive, no cards for you loser way that I might do. He replied with overwhelming force. In the year following the execution of the Mongolian envoy, 1218 to 1219 AD, Genghis Khan decided that this area right here, where the mountains open up to the grasslands, would be an excellent place for him to rally his troops for his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire. It is estimated that around 150,000 Mongolian soldiers gathered here before the invasion. The invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire saw typical Mongol brutality. The Khwarezmians weren't just defeated, they were bitch-slapped so hard into non-existence that their mere name became nothing but a small footnote in the annals of human history. Because, let's be honest, how many of you had ever heard of the Khwarezmian Empire before this video? Unless you're big into history, it's likely this name has never crossed your path. Meanwhile, pretty much everyone has heard of the Mongols, because this, my dear lovely YouTube viewer, was also the beginning of the phrase, fuck around and find out. The population of the Khwarezmian Empire prior to the Mongol invasion is estimated to have been around 5 million souls. The population afterwards is thought to be less than 1 million. Within barely a year, the entire Khwarezmian Empire was left in ruin and many of their cities either conquered or completely destroyed, including some of the world's largest cities at that time, such as Merv. We'll be doing Merv in another video, by the way, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one when it's out. Genghis Khan's revenge and destruction of entire cities also include some wee things that may shock us today, such as the sacking of Nishapur, a once great city that was completely obliterated over the course of a mere 10 days. After the death of Tukachar, the husband of Genghis Khan's daughter, the daughter then demanded that the entire city face the consequences and personally stuck around to oversee the death of every single resident of the city. And in order to make sure that there would be no wounded survivors, she demanded that the deaths come at the expense of their heads. The Mongolian army beheaded the entire population. Men, women, children, all included. Even the cats and the dogs were put to the sword. Their heads then piled up in giant pyramids outside the city walls. It is estimated that more than 1.7 million people were slaughtered at the behest of this woman scorned. So it's fair to say that this is what modern humans might refer to as a wee bit of a war crime. Now, very quickly before we continue, I'd like to ask that if you at all are into history with a sarcastic bite, which is what I'm going to call this, and also you haven't completely hated everything so far, then please do like and subscribe. YouTube says it's good for the algorithm, and well, God knows I need all the help I can get. Thank you 13 times. Now then, in 1220 AD, Genghis Khan returned here to this place with some fond memories of where it had all begun. He came back and looked out over the barren Mongolian steppe and thought, you know what this place needs? A city. And so Karakorum was born, a place to kick back after a hard day of pillaging and maybe do some light admin work. A place born as a remembrance of where the Mongolian army had amassed before moving on to kill some folks that had pissed them off. Karakorum also worked as a nice new centralized capital for a Mongolian empire that had basically just doubled its landmass in the space of a year. So, Karakorum, prime real estate right where the Orkhan Valley leaves the mountains and enters the plains. For Genghis, it was perfect. He plopped his city down on the crossroads of ancient trade routes, turning it into a medieval pit stop for merchants from all over Asia and Europe. Now, Genghis didn't live to see the city flourish. He met his maker in China some years later. That honor of expanding Karakorum went to his son, Ögedei Khan. Ögedei took Daddy's little project and ran with it, turning Karakorum into the empire's capital city. Under his rule, Karakorum became a major site of world politics. They had a palace, markets, temples, and all the rest. They even had a massive silver tree that poured booze. That's right, you did just hear me correctly. A giant silver tree that dispensed wine. You've got to hand it to the Mongols. They knew how to combine leisure with excess. They captured a famous goldsmith from Paris, turned him into a slave, and forced him to carve a giant mechanical silver tree that gave them wine when they felt like it. And that right there is a sentence with at least 6 different parts that make me go, wait, what? And so I'll repeat it to myself and for you too, because my brain is really needing another go at this one. They captured a famous goldsmith from Paris, turned him into a slave, and forced him to carve a giant mechanical silver tree that gave them wine when they felt like it. Karakorum wasn't just about Mongols sitting around drinking fermented mare's milk, though. This place grew to become a melting pot, a 13th century New York City. Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, shamans, everyone was welcome here as long as they didn't mind paying taxes to a guy who would kill you if you didn't. The Mongols were remarkably tolerant when it came to religion, which is a fancy way of saying they didn't care what you believed, as long as you acknowledged their supremacy and forked over your money. Believe whatever you want, just don't make trouble, because empires need harmony, and it's difficult to have stability when there are idiots at home throwing punches over their favorite magic sky daddy. But all good things must come to an end. By the mid-13th century, the Mongol Empire started falling apart. Family squabbles, succession crises. No, I want to be king next. You know, the usual things you shout at your brother. Then along comes Kublai Khan, who decides he's too good for the steppe and moves the capital to Beijing. Karakorum was left out in the cold, reduced to a simple administrative center. Although life here continued for another century, the city would never again see the might and riches of its past. A deciding insult came in the year AD 1388, when the city was captured and then burned to the ground by armies of the Ming dynasty, after which the great city of Karakorum was abandoned and left to ruin. For a while, in 1415, the council decided to rebuild the city, and it once again became capital in the early 16th century. However, it also again became a target and was attacked, captured and recaptured several times over the next decades. Karakorum was finally abandoned for the last time around the middle of the 16th century. The present-day Erden Zoo monastery now stands nearby the ruins of the once great Mongolian capital. The monastery itself built from the bits and pieces of the city that nobody had carted off yet. Centuries later, the modern town Karakorum was also founded nearby the ancient ruins, a small sleepy town with a population that wouldn't fill a high school gym. And so it's time once again for that part of the lesson where we review what have we learned today, what's the moral of the story. Maybe it's that no matter how big and bad you think you are, time and entropy will eventually catch up with you. Or maybe it's that human beings, given half a chance, will build something magnificent and then burn it to the ground. Either way, Karakorum is a reminder of the fleeting nature of power and the enduring capacity for human stupidity and violence. And maybe, just maybe, that's something we all need to remember. I've also learned that although, as they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, hell itself doesn't know a thing when compared to a Mongolian woman scorned. If you do ever happen to annoy someone Mongolian of the female persuasion, then just cut all ties to the life you think you had. Gather your things and leave. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Just run for the hills. Do not look back and pray to God that nobody saw where you were going. I've also learned that what I thought was a modern phenomenon, that being cool gadgets, is actually not modern at all. Sure, Q gave 007 loads of shiny things, but did James Bond ever get a giant silver tree that dispensed booze whenever he pressed a button? No, he did not, and that, my friends, is why Karakorum is better than James Bond or even Inspector Gadget. And this is not open for debate. And finally, I think one of the most important things to take away from any of this is that if someone comes to you peacefully, bearing gifts and making offers, just fucking take them and say yes. Because Muhammad II, ruler of the Khwarezmian Empire, may single-handedly be responsible for one of the greatest mistakes in human history. After the overwhelming and swift defeat of the Khwarezmians, the Mongols were then encouraged by their victory to just keep going, and so built one of the largest empires in history, conquering China, the Middle East, and half of Europe, with literally hundreds of millions dead. And all because some rich prick thought he was too good to trade with what he considered to be a barbarian empire full of dirty tent dwellers. Well, those dirty tent dwellers sure showed him. And let that be a lesson to us all. Never, ever, ever look a gift horse in the mouth. And it all started here, at Karakorum. Now, before we wrap up, once again, let me remind you that I love some people. And I love other people even more. And the ones I love the most are George H., Thad S., DD, David R., Stephen Anthony T., and Malichi I, who are by far and away the greatest Patreons life has ever known. True story. And with that, it is time to leave. I'm out like a bean sprout. Thanks once again for coming. Don't forget to return, and please do remember to like and subscribe as much as is physically possible. Until the next time. Peace, love, and Karakorum. Goodbye!